to do the karakia, but so you all know, we are being recorded and proceedings will be posted online at a later date within
48 hours.
48 hours. So, Dale, if you could please, to be honest.
Mai iti pai manga, raro ki te tai. Mai iti awa tonga, raro ki te awa raki. Tēnei te hapori awhi ai taratahi. Whanau, haramai te toki, hui tāki.
So, thank you very much, Dale. Apologies. We have no apologies. We have just acknowledging that we have Councillor Ayling is online and isolating herself and her whānau. Conflicts of interest declaration. Are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? No. Next item of business, item number 4, public forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have today is a special day and that we are seeking to take this opportunity to acknowledge 2 people who have been good servants of the Carterton district and through that service, I would say, in my view, of New Zealand, and they've been former Mayor Greg Lang and former long-serving councillor Jill Greathead. And we are offering the opportunity for both those people to speak and say a few final words to the council and to you all. I want to start by saying that Jill will be speaking first. And I think when we look back at the history of Carterton, a councillor who's served 21 years, that is the longest time that a councillor has served in the Carterton District Council as we know it today. I think there may well have been someone in the times of the Borough Council and the County Councils that served a similar period of time, but I think it has to be noted. And in that time, Jill, if I cast my mind back, you were very heavily engaged in a range of things from wastewater management to the landfill, the event centre development, which you were a key part of that, along with people like Ruth Carter and Elaine Brazendale and John and Gary McPhee and the rest. And here we are sitting today in that building, which indicated some courage from the council of that time that made that decision. Maungatauri Restoration Project is one of your big projects. And the development and the fight of the Wairarapa Unitary Authority proposal, which you were heavily involved in, along with people like Councillor, former Mayor Lynn Patterson and Adrian Staples back in those days. So a lot of water has gone under the bridge, heavily involved in Carterton and the council housing with Carter Society. Local Government Commission's final proposal to amalgamate the 3 Wairarapas, which the 3 Wairarapa councils into a super city. You, along with some other people, took a lead role in fighting that, and I want to acknowledge Ron Shaw over there as well for his part in that. So, Jill, it gives me pleasure to, I'm going to hand this chair to you so that you are there with the camera, and I'm going to sit over that side, and I'd invite you to say a few words, please.
So, Mr Mayor, councillors and our residents around me, thanks for the opportunity to speak, where I'm just going to touch on what I've learned over the years, just a few points, some future challenges, and finish with a little guidance. So what I've learned is I've just chosen 4 main things. Number 1, that a healthy and collaborative relationship between the CE, the mayors and councillors is vitally important. Secondly, that council's job is to spend our community's money wisely. We're a small rural district and don't have the resources to provide the assets and the initiatives that larger councils can. Thirdly, that change, whatever that is expensive and creates major upheaval. And I often feel that decision makers often vote on an ideology and don't necessarily take into account the operational impact of that change. And every vote that you make will have a financial impact somewhere in its deployment. And lastly, and that is pushback on central government. Otherwise, they will keep downloading their ideologies onto communities who have become burdened with rapidly increasing rates and debt over the past few decades. So some future challenges, you're all very aware of those, but firstly, local government has been overwhelmed by central government with unfunded mandates. And of course, we now have the Three Waters and the RMA reforms, which will create massive change and cost to our council structure. The issue is that these reforms really run the risk of creating centralised bureaucracies that don't serve our communities well. And the other challenge, of course, is rates affordability, not only due to the deluge of unfunded mandates, but also what I consider has been in some ways overspending in the guise of modernisation. This forecast recession next year will result in economic hardship for many, and high rates really will exacerbate this hardship for our people. So a little guidance, I'll leave you with two principles that I believe are vital to governance and leadership, and that is democracy and freedom. I believe that democracy works when the opinions and ideas of our residents are listened to, respected, and included as part of your decision making. I prefer to add the word deliberative in front of the word democracy, where deliberation, as opposed to debate, is used to achieve consensus around the table. In my earlier years of council, we were less formal and we deliberated back across and around the table. All opinions were welcomed and were thrashed out, and consensus was almost always reached, and that resulted in a strong and just decision-making process, which of course strengthens local democracy. This building is one of those particular items. The other principle is freedom. Obviously, currently our world is in a period of upheaval where all of our freedoms are being challenged. Many of our current systems and ideologies are not working to serve communities. Many people are now losing trust in those who hold the power. And I believe the only way that democracy and freedom can be achieved for our society in the future is from the bottom up, and that starts in our communities. So in conclusion, I'd like to acknowledge the 5 mayors, the 4 CEs, 25 councillors, and obviously also the countless number of Carterton residents that I've actually worked with in many of the issues that you spoke about originally, Ron. So, and finally, I'd like to wish you all the very best for a successful triennium of decision making, upholding local democracy and pushing back on central government. Thank you.
Thank you. Please all play. Just a little token of our esteem, and it's something to mark your service with Carterton District Council and to the people of Carterton.
Yep.
And please accept this on behalf of all the council and all of the council staff as just that token to remind you of the service you've given to us. Now, to the man himself, Greg. It's interesting. Greg and I were having text conversations this morning before I came down to the office, and I said, Greg, just give me something, a bit of a background of the things that you feel most proud of. And I have no doubt Greg's going to talk about some of those things. But I think the one thing that left out, Greg, is that you came onto council in 2013 as one of my new councillors when we had a few adjustments back then. And I guess the thing that we always knew about you, Greg, you were always focused seriously on community right from the day you arrived here. And that never changed in the whole of the time that you served as mayor. But I think, the part that where you really focused your attention was around economic development and that task force, which became WEDS, and you driving the reboot of the strategy and delivering the mechanism that we have now. And I do know that in talking to Dame Margaret Baisley almost weekly, as I did when I was in cabinet, your input was always in there, and it was always strong. It was always solid. So this is your opportunity, Greg, and I'm going to cede this here to you again and ask you if you would please address everybody. Thank you.
Well, everyone, kia ora koutou. It's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the introduction, Ron. And just acknowledging yourself, councillors, marama, staff, and everyone else in the room. The best asset our community has, by a long shot, and it's because it's the essence of our community, is the staff of Carterton District Council. They go the extra mile, they're hands-on, they're everywhere, and that's the reason why we're so prosperous. And that comes down through different levels, but it comes down to leadership. And I've worked with 4 chief executives. One was an interim chief executive, but they all did their best at the time. They all had circumstances which were very hard to deal with, but they stepped up and they did what they was required of them at that time. And through that leadership, it flowed down through. And with our chief executive at the moment, Jeff Hamilton, I believe Jeff is an outstanding chief executive. It's been a pleasure to work with you, Jeff. And just that corporate experience, the other lens that you bring to tackle the situation that small councils are in at the moment is phenomenal. So really appreciate it. And also the staff, managers, 5 of them sitting over there, are fantastic leaders in each of their fields, their own departments. I won't go through each of them, but Glenda, Solitaire, Kelly, Jerry and Johannes, fantastic. And we should be very proud of them and what they do. The other thing I want to do, I don't want to really highlight any staff really, but there are 4 staff members that I really want to push. And the first of them is, well, the 3 of them actually, and that's what I call the customer happiness team. And that's the 3 girls on the front counter. That's Katrina, Sharon and Sue. They are the front face of every decision that's made here, and they have to deal with such a lot on that front counter, yet they're happy, they work really hard, and they deliver it, just like our Parks and Reserve staff do. You know, we're so lucky to have our own Parks and Reserve team. If there's any graffiti in town, it's predominantly gone by 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. They're there, they really care, and the gardens in our community are just fantastic. And there's one other person who I work quite closely with, which I'd like to really acknowledge, and that's Elisa. Elisa, you're fantastic. We should be so proud of Elisa and the stories that she tells in front-footing our community. We're really proud to have worked with you, and council and the community is very lucky to have you. And also the 3 EAs that I've worked with, Trish, Cherie and Sarah, fantastic. You've really supported me well. And I really cherish our relationships as a council when I was there that we've developed, especially at Hurunui-o-Rangi Marae. Fantastic. Living in Gladstone, I've worked with the Marae, but it's at a new level at the council table, and I really look forward to that partnership. And having you, Marama, at this table, I think is phenomenal. So thank you. And that goes with the relationship too with Matakapu Kurowhiria and Joel Ngātuiri. I think that is a relationship that's really going to blossom, and it's something that we really need to, as a community, to take on board, because our relationship with Hapu is far more important than with iwi.
Kia ora.
Yeah. And one other person I want to really acknowledge, who I think has made a huge difference to the Wairarapa, and she hasn't really been acknowledged for what she has done, and Ron mentioned her, but Dame Margaret Baisley, she was phenomenal. PGF came out, Wairarapa didn't have an economic development strategy, and she really drove to get an economic development strategy up and running so that we could access the PGF. And the foresight that she had, you know, our regional schools leadership group is years ahead of any other one in the country. You know, we've got a water resilience strategy, a workforce plan, and a whole list of different things. And the current strategy we have at the moment, it's just so well placed to put the Wairarapa on a good footing. And we're seeing it all the time. We're leading it. And the team that's in place, the Weeds team, phenomenal. And I'd certainly like to acknowledge the governance team. Governance is very, very difficult when $140,000 is a 1% rates increase. It's very, very difficult when you've got to make those decisions. But we work well. We certainly had our challenges, but I just want to thank the governance team. And there's three members that I'd really like to highlight who I've worked over a long period of time. One is Robin. Robin and I have been involved in economic development. We've climbed buildings, to paint buildings. We've done all sorts of things. And you've always had my back and really supported me. So thank you. It's been a pleasure. And the other one is Rebecca. I know Rebecca's not here today, but she is going to watch this online later. But Rebecca, for a young lady with a young family, phenomenal, well respected around New Zealand in the Young Leaders Network. And just some of the foresight and the work that she's done for our community, whether it's the mural or you would have seen we just got funding for the Eastern Cycleway there, linking the 5 schools up. Well, that was her. She pushed it and she talked to all the schools and got it together. Yeah, really, really had my back, and a really, really good deputy mayor. And the other person is Brian. Brian, you're solid as a rock. You understand the community, the rural community especially, and yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with you on the council. In fact, it's been a real privilege being mayor. It's a role that you can't underestimate, and you have no idea what's involved until you actually get involved, and it's just involving. It takes over your life. My term as mayor, I felt it was very constrained. When I went down to Wellington to get civil defence training, we had a role scenario, and the group that I was in ended up with the conclusion that, well, we had a pandemic situation, and we were laughing that you could fire a shotgun down the main street of Queenstown and not hit anyone. Well, in March, just following being elected in November, we had the first community case in New Zealand in Carterton. And 2.5 years of my mayoralty was sort of under that constraint, and I felt like I never really got out of first gear. But during that time, I believe that I focused on the issues. I haven't got involved in any politicization or grandstanding of issues, but just worked on the facts to get the best outcomes for our community and using our resources, which are very limited, to the best. It's one thing I just want to share with you. As a mayor, you get many phone calls. I'm sure, Ron, you've had quite a few already. But one that stands out in a funny way is early one Sunday morning. Wasn't too early, but it was early enough. I got a phone call, and it was just after COVID restrictions have been lifted a bit, and the Wainara industrial estate was just coming back into life. And it must have been a wind blowing up towards Mount Holsworth, because I got a phone call from a lady saying that there's a siren, like a foghorn, coming out of one of the industrial yards. And she said it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And a minute later, she said, "You know what I mean?" Well, that's very clever. Unfortunately, my mayoralty didn't go on either. But yeah, life's full of adventures, and I'm all about taking things to the most. So I'm on a new journey now. I'm still involved in the community. I still want to see the 5 Towns Trail Network come through fruition, and I'll do what I can to help there. I'm currently chair of a group in Gladstone, an organic group called the Gladstone Project, which facilitates community work out in Gladstone. And in February, I'm taking over the chair role of Heart of Arts, a gallery that I started in 2015, and I'm going to work with them to basically get through the earthquake strengthening and set their future up. And also my main focus is to regenerate our business, the Wheelwright shop, and focus on carriage building and the passing on of those skills in the future. So just to conclude, I wish the new council all the best. It's going to be a very challenging period. It's always challenging, but I think it's going to be even more challenging than ever. And it wouldn't be a valedictory speech if I didn't have a request. And it's a very simple request and it gets overlooked sometimes, but that you express vision. And that's long-term vision. Really, really, really important. And especially when we look at the future governance of the Wairarapa. Because I believe that we, just like our children in schools at the moment, are going to be doing jobs that haven't been invented yet. I believe the future governance of the Wairarapa has been invented yet. And I don't think the Westminster system or even co-governance is the future. There's a new way of looking at it. So, and as you work through that, please show vision. And I'll leave it at that. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
So Greg, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you. And can you please pass on our regards to her?
Well, because unfortunately she wasn't able to make it. She's got a new job and wasn't able to get here.
Yeah, well, we're poorer for that, but we're thinking of her right now. But look, there are a couple of little things that it's my duty to present you with. Firstly, there is this letter from the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. It's acknowledging your service to the Carterton district as its mayor, and signed by Nanaia and Karen McNulty. Like fantastic for that first one. Fantastic. There's a certificate here. This is a card from all of council. Staff. From staff. This one here, I'll leave you to open at your own time. This is from the staff who obviously you wait to very, very honourable on your behalf and you sort of say that's something from them. But from council and from the staff as well. A poem that we hope that you wear. And
It looks wicked.
recognition of your time and your service to the community. So thank you.
Tēnei au wera ra whāia guru nei ia. Au, au e hān. Tēnā koe te rangatia.
Thank you, everyone.
I think I will just conclude that by thanking you all for coming along. This is a quite critical moment. Bill, acknowledging you there as well. I'm looking around to see where you were. That to acknowledge, being here to acknowledge the service of both Jill and Greg is very, very important. I think that's appropriate, and particularly if we're heading into the Christmas break now. I also want to take the opportunity to thank those of you here who have put your name forward to serve your community in the past. It is a brave thing to do that. As Greg said, it isn't a bed of roses. And the Sunday phone calls and the late Saturday night phone calls are those things that keep you sharp and keep you focused and sometimes keep you a little frustrated. But Greg, I know the job you're doing, and I thank you on behalf of everybody for that. And we're always here, and don't be going too far because you have skills and talents that we would be wrong to ignore going forward. And I just hope we can just keep chatting.
Yep.
Maybe look some gaps.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much.
There's no agenda this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item.
Here we go.
All there for us. Yeah, this is good. Yeah. I'm young. Myself. See you. All right.
Council business. You mean all those people don't come to us?
The local democracy reporter just messaged and asked what was happening, so I've just sent a note that I'm not interested in. So you can all go home.
A massive.
Yeah. Thank you for staying, Stefan, because we're obviously interested in Carterton.
Yeah. Plenty of seats to choose from.
Got glue on it.
I think it's, before we move from that, it's appropriate to acknowledge Michael O'Donnell, who was severely injured in a gliding accident. He's in Burwood Hospital, who stood for council as well. So for the record, we are thinking of his family. We posted online acknowledging him, and I myself know Michael from the Aero Club and from his support for Wings and a lot of other people, Ryan, from the community. So item 5, Youth Council views. Do we have no submission from Youth Council to go forward? Item 6, minutes of the inaugural meeting. Looking for someone to move that they are a true and accurate Deputy Mayor Dale Williams. Moved, seconded by Councillor Cherry-Campbell. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 7.1, going straight to correspondence. The recommendations that we note the correspondence received. You have copies there. Someone move. Councillor Della, seconded Councillor Cretney. All in favour? Yeah. Okay, so as well, thank you, Chair. Is there any discussion, any questions on the correspondence that's attached?
I'd just like to acknowledge the letter from Mike Johns. As we, can read in there, there is a lot of discussion on elderly and their disadvantage. So I'd just like to invite or motion that we invite Mike Johns to speak to us at a council meeting about his concerns in the public forum sessions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cherry-Campbell.
Following on from that, I second inviting him to come in and speak at public forum if he is available. And also that the ageing strategy staff member that we have taken care of that sphere is actually connected with Mike Johns to discuss the letter and make him aware of the different services that council are connecting through.
Totally appropriate. Yeah. It's moved and seconded. Are there any other comments?
Just comments in addition to the ageing strategy going forward that might also, some of this, I met with Glenda and Lisa just yesterday in regards to the meeting, the last meeting of council, because I missed the first one being away. And that we are looking at the review of that program going forward with iwi participation as well and inviting affected groups so that it is co-created. It's a great meeting.
Note to that.
Glenda?
Another comments? So we have a motion on the table that Mike Johns be invited to present at the next public forum. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Destination Wairarapa quarterly report, quite a substantial report.
We do have Anna's here.
Is Anna?
Anna's here.
There she is. Oh, Anna, hi. You're hiding in that corner there. Come and take a seat. Thank you, Anna.
I was quite relieved when everyone left. It's a full house.
They actually turned up to hear you.
Yeah.
Of course.
So they
didn't see you there. And they,
No. Kia ora, everyone. For those of you who I haven't met, the new councillors, I'm Anna Nielsen. I'm the General Manager for Destination Wairarapa. Are there any questions that have come in the report?
any highlights you particularly wish to speak to or comment on, Anna? I know the report's quite thorough.
Yes. Look, the key thing, and I've sat here, as many of you have heard me speak about how well tourism is doing in our region. With the international borders, our borders open now and international visitors welcome to our region, we are seeing more visitors arriving, which is fantastic. We kicked off in conjunction with Hawke's Bay, Marlborough and Wellington, which is, we're part of the Classic New Zealand Wine Trail, which is a touring route through Downstate Highway 2. We did significant activity in Australia, and that's starting to show the rewards of that activity. It was predominantly funded by the STAT funding that we received, which is Strategic Tourism Assets Protection Program money. That's a lovely government acronym. But we as a region were blessed with that funding. We were able to do things that we've never been able to do before. One of the outcomes of that funding was the creation of the Destination Management Plan. And for the new people, if you haven't had a chance to read that plan, I would urge you to do so. It's a document that we spent at least 9-10 months consulting with community, business, council, regional council, travel operators, iwi, you name it. We spoke to everyone to see what their attitude was towards tourism and their desire for growth, and also then match that up with the demand data from Wellington. Really get a good picture of what our future looked like and the potential success that we might achieve if we work together. And it was well received by all three councils and endorsed, and I'm very proud of that document because all three councils are supportive of it, and it's really neat to see everybody joined up in their desire to see the sector succeed. On a more localised tangent with Carterton in particular, one of the key outcomes of the Destination Management Plan was our need to develop more product. So product is sort of packaging up businesses so that you can sell a solution to a tourist at a greater price, not necessarily trying to price ourselves out of the market, but in order to provide them a full experience of our region and opportunity to meet with people and discover new things. We don't have a lot of product in this region, and in particular in Carterton. And one of the outcomes was we needed a specialist to help us with development of product. We employed Chrissy Cummings, who is an expert in that area. We've got her for 12 months. Her contract finishes on the 30th of June, again, stat funded. And I know she's created an impact in Carterton. She met with 20 to 25 businesses at Go Carterton recently, all tourism businesses or people who had aspirations in tourism, to discuss what they were up to. And there's some really neat opportunities for businesses that didn't know that their neighbour was doing something or something down the road that could work together. An example is Lavender Abbey and the TP Cider people, and an opportunity to collab there, and just an excitement in general of the types of different businesses here, bringing them together, creating some confidence, and then Chrissy will be able to go speak to them individually and assist them with things like pricing, qualmark, benchmarking activities, all sorts of things. And it's really great to be able to offer the service that we've wanted to for a long time. And I know that areas such as Carterton, we've done the same thing out at Tanui and Castle Point, to really maximise the opportunity that we have right across this region, not just certain areas of it when it comes to tourism.
Are there any questions? I'm not forgetting you, Grace, as well. Just Councillor Campbell. Sure.
Thank you.
A question around the spend and the collection of data where you were using MRTE, which obviously is disrupted.
Yep.
And the interim measure using the TECT. Are you going to continue with TECT, or is it going back to the previous? Because the comparisons.
I know.
Yeah,
it's a very good question. It's a question at a national level. So the data that we receive comes from MB, and they're the ones who switch it around depending on the robustness of the data they're getting at the other end. I would hope that they go back to that, but I don't know if that's possible. There is a a bigger data conversation and a group of key people at a much higher level than I having this conversation as we speak. And I am hopeful that there is a better solution going forward. But also I think, and that's the national level, but also I think we can do better at a regional wide. And I've been having conversations with Marston District Council, Matt Steele there, and also the WEBS team about how do we at a regional level get better data right across our region and present it in a way, not just for the likes of yourselves, but also for those who have interest in developing a tourism product, give them a dashboard of what's happening in terms of the growth and spend, and if we need to purchase more data or look for funding for better data to forecast better growth, then that's absolutely fine.
Because this is fairly restrictive. Isn't it? It doesn't give a very good picture really at all.
No,
Yeah.
no, and the accommodation data, they used to be done by Statistics New Zealand, and now it's and that was you were forced to do it. You had to present that data each month. Now it's voluntary. It's run by a private group called Fresh Info. The information for our region is not particularly robust. There's a tendency for people just to copy and paste, which is not helpful at all.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ayling?
The only thing I was going to say was I really enjoyed reading through the report, and I think just well done for the work you're doing. I have family in Australia, and they were messaging me saying, we hear there's this great thing happening in Greytown over winter. So it really is getting the message far and wide. So great work.
Hurunui.
Just to clarify, Greytown's not in the Carterton district?
Point.
Yes, I'm aware.
I think that was.
My question, I've just got a couple. I have not ever seen the management plan. Is that up on your website, or is that something I can ask?
Yeah, it's the link is on the Wairarapa website, but I'm more than happy to send that to you. We didn't print a whole lot out. It's better just to have it online.
Online would be great. I can go and have a look for that. And then the other question was, you said the Māori Tourism Council. Do we have one? Do we?
Representative here, so that is. Now I'm on the spot.
You mean the national one?
Yes, the national.
Right, sorry. Not a Wairarapa wide.
No.
Do you believe there's a need for a Wairarapa wide one that just is tourism focused and not whole iwi everything focused?
Yeah, I do actually. And we're attempting to, we've developed a Māori tourism strategy after much discussion with the two iwi here, further afield, and those people, Kohunui Marae as well, Papawai Marae to a certain extent, and those people who are existing tourism operators about what they need. So this tourism strategy we've had developed by a Māori tourism specialist, Kairi Lufu Karawana, and it's for Destination Wairarapa and for the councils and those involved to assist those who have aspirations in tourism to achieve what they want to. And that's to get the ball rolling. Jo Stevens-Love, who is the eyesight team leader in throughout the region, so she looks after Martinborough and Masterton. She is creating a cohort of Māori tourism businesses to support one another, to start talking about what is it they need to help them achieve. And then from there, we Destination Wairarapa will help facilitate those conversations, which is why I have had discussions with the Director of Regions from the National Māori Tourism Council. And I've just forgotten his name, which I'm so mortified with.
Not Matt.
Matt.
And Munson.
Yes, it is.
Used to work for me, that boy.
Yeah, great.
Only pick the best people. All right, I will make get in touch with some of them and see how we can progress this a little bit further forward.
Yes, and I am calling on Matt because of his connections also to the region that he should help us a little bit out.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? See, councillor Leisure.
Anna, Corner. I don't like being negative, but I do have a couple of questions to ask just about some of the, you put a photo on the report you provided us with a Dominion Post advert and everything. And one of the events is Mangananoka. And I've on your website, Wairarapa NZ, there's any number of events on there which are in Dannevirke, Woodville, Norsewood, and I just find it's kind of, I feel like we're meant to be focusing on the Wairarapa, but events are getting put on the website which are drawing people out of the Wairarapa. And do you feel that that's a good thing for?
It's actually the way the tourists don't recognise boundaries. They will travel down State Highway 2 or up State Highway 2 or the vice versa. The Mangananoka, so the Tui breweries, they're a member of Destination Wairarapa. They see the value in being part of a bigger whole because there isn't actually too much going on in their patch. For us, it helps draw people from Palmerston North, and Palmerston North is a great feeding, I mean that in a sense of feeding of visitors to this region. We're only an hour away. We have a lot going on over here that appeals. So stopping for an event there or for a coffee on their way here is really how we promote it. It's not so much getting people to come through and not stop. It's to assist with that pull over. Yeah.
So do you think the same about the people, about the companies like Dannevirke or the Woodville Christmas Market and the Norsewood Christmas Market and events at the Dannevirke Library and things like that are promoted on the Wairarapa NZ website?
I haven't seen too much of that on the website. If they are, there's probably not a lot of attention placed on that. It's more in the when and where, which is the newsletter that we send out to our database.
Okay.
I'm actually surprised that those are on there.
Yeah, just there's a box on the right-hand side of your website which says, do you want to list your event here? So I kind of...
That's Event Finder. Yeah, it's a direct feed from Event Finder. But
you can click on the pages on your website. There might be 15 pages.
Yeah.
You click through and there's a number of events there like Dannevirke and Woodville and Norsewood are mentioned in there. So I'm just curious how they managed to get on the Wairarapa NZ page, that's all.
Well, yeah, I will check into that. It's not something that we actively promote, certainly Cherry Brewery, but not so much because those are community things. And what I imagine is it's come through on what's called an API feed through with Event Finder, which is how we promote a lot of events. Wellington NZ does the same, but I will check that one out.
Thank you.
Might be that you can just change the filter so it's not Hararua districts, community events.
It might be just a bit broad.
I think it's a subtle hint from Destination Wairarapa that we need to absorb everything up to Woodville. Councillor Laurence.
It's not really a question, but just following on from Chrissy's appearance at our little function, it was on Monday of last week. There was a good attendance, there was a lot of enthusiasm. And what we have decided to do is just to build on that. And I'm from Carterton. So we are going to run a digital marketing campaign for Carterton in January. And this is coming together, thanks to Lou, incredibly quickly. So it's not going to be by any means perfect. We just it's going to be based around come to Carterton, bring your family to Carterton for $100 for a day. And some things that, a program that people can put together. And we'll just see how we go.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, Chrissy just really raved about the enthusiasm in the room and the fact that everyone was there to talk about the future and that the excitement was great. And just the connections of people, what they could do together collectively, but also in smaller cohorts as well. It's well done for organising that and welcoming Chrissy and allowing her to speak.
Any other comments, questions, observations? I only got one small observation, and Councillor Cherry-Campbell has already advised me that if I learn how to use my laptop properly, it won't be a problem. Some of the graphics on there, I can't read.
Right.
It's too small, but I'll take it. Yeah, I know.
I can give you lessons.
Deputy Mayor and the Mayor are a little bit slow with that IT stuff.
We'll note that.
Yeah. Well, if that was in landscape on a page of its own.
Oh, okay.
I'd be able to read it. So.
Technically not your issue, Anna.
Technically, yeah.
Thank you.
Dedicated myself. All right, no, thank you very much. And Anna, thank you very much for coming to present. And so the recommendations, the council receives the report. Councillor Cretney, Councillor Cherry-Campbell, all in favour? Aye. Against? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anna.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Anna, have a good Christmas.
Thank you.
Have a big Christmas.
Yeah, have a busy Christmas.
7.3, Three Waters reform update. Jeff, pretty cool report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll take the report as read and just highlight a couple of things. So what I've done in the report for the new elected members is just to walk through a bit of a history on Three Waters reform and our interaction with central government on the Three Waters reform proposals. So there's some links in there to our submissions, both on the original Water Services Entity Bill number 1 and also on our submission to the Economic Regulation Package, which is yet to come into Parliament. There are essentially three bills. The first bill creates the Water Services Entity. The second bill, which is should be introduced to Parliament before Christmas, will transfer a whole lot of powers, duties and responsibilities that we as council have to deliver water services and manage wastewater and stormwater, and those will transfer to the new Water Services Entity. So that's the second bill, will allow all of those powers, duties and responsibilities to transfer, and they come from a range of legislation, which is why it requires a separate bill on its own. And the third bill will be around economic regulation and consumer protections. And that bill has yet to come into Parliament. That bill is being developed by MB, as opposed to the first two, which are being developed by the Department of Internal Affairs. The only other thing that I would like to highlight as part of the report, which I'm sure Marama would have picked up quite astutely, is that there appears to be two work streams, a council work stream run by DIA, and they appear to be very late to the party with a work stream with engaging iwi representation on the progress of DIA and the NTU. And those two work streams appear to be running in parallel, but not necessarily linked at this stage, which to me is quite a risk, in that the two work streams aren't given the same information or don't get the same feedback through to the DIA and the decision makers. So I consider that a risk. The other risk that I consider is the potential for a change in government, which could create an enormous amount of backtracking later on during the process, but we can't do anything about that risk at this stage. So I just thought I would flag it. Happy to take questions on this very straightforward piece of legislation. I jest.
Councillor Cretney.
Thank you, His Worship. Jeff, I just have one question. It's in the funding agreement, and it's mentioned about the 350k maximum transition support. And I know in the past you've mentioned to us about 850k. Do you see that as a risk?
$350,000 has been received. So I'm firstly pleased to say we have received the first tranche of $350,000, and that's an annual payment. So we should, if this carries on for 2 years, we should get $700,000 between now and the time the Three Waters reform goes live. So there is a small risk there that we incur more cost than the $700,000, i.e. up to the $800,000. At this stage, we are struggling to resource that, so we will look to external resources to help with that, which will give us a really good measure to fence our costs going forward. But yes, it is a risk.
Yeah, just some comment about where this is going, and I see
following the select committee recommendations that it's going to include rural water. It seems like it is and probably will. I'm really grateful that you're able to summarise what's happening so that I don't have to read all the reports in the parliament and the bill and all of those bits. It's really helpful information. And I am concerned about where we sit here. And I think Kahungunu and Rangitani are getting ready to work on the mana whakahonu arrangements from the RMA, from the existing RMA that don't look like they'll be taken out of the new RMA, which is working with each of the councils to negotiate how we manage our local resources, which we're hoping that by doing so may sort of keep itself across this water stuff. So as you provide us the information, that might be the only way we get that information. Thank you for highlighting that. But I will endeavour to keep the council up to date with where Māori as a national body are feeling about this. Because prior to the rural water going in, they were all going, yeah, this is great. Councils have screwed water all over the place, so we're happy to take it off your hands, just quietly. But when we start talking about rural allocation and things like that, this feels like the government are taking control of the water and therefore ownership. And that may mean to larger and bigger things for Māori across the nation. So I'm just signalling that I will endeavour as Hurunui-o-Rangi's rep, as you have with in good faith, to bring what I can to the table so we're all kept up to date where we're sitting and where the iwi are sitting. So thank you for this. It's been very helpful.
So on that note, Madam, I guess the one that stood out to me was page 63, where this is intention to do a stock take of treaty settlement legislation arrangements and engagement with iwi. It seems to me the cart and the horse have got mixed up.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. If they break any of the treaty legislation, the whole country will jump up and down, or Māori will jump up and down in a great big hurry about it. Yeah. Because you do that to one, you can do that to them more, which is why I think this is now starting to look less favourable than it was previously.
Yeah, it seemed to me that initially there was a lot of reasons for Māori to get in behind it, but as things have been, and I think, thank you, Chair, because this is a very good summary, and it does cherry pick or point out specific issues that clearly have not been thought through as well. So I think when you're looking at Tainui and Ngāi Tahu, who are worth about 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion, the fight will not be a small one, if anyone.
And they control the flow of the Waikato River, which feeds Auckland.
Absolutely, yeah.
Remember that.
Councillor Ayling, are you looking to make a comment here?
Yeah. So I would totally agree with what you've said, Marama. The summary is very interesting. The main thing that I would like you to talk to, Jeff, is that final point you make about if the reform proceeds, the ongoing viability of a small rural council. I wonder if you could talk to how you see Carterton Council surviving post our assets all going to central government.
Got a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Ayling. I think you have to consider the range of reforms together. You can't just take Three Waters reform. So we have to look at the Three Waters reform, RMA reforms, spatial reforms that are occurring with Natural and Built Environment Act, future for local government, changes to civil defence legislation, and consider all of those together in one. And I think when you consider all of those together, you might come up with a different answer than if you just took one particular piece of legislation and said, what is the impact of that one piece of legislation? I guess the reference could be death by 1,000 cuts. That's probably the most closest approximation you could do. So I think when you consider them all together, you really look at, should the Wairarapa be more than or less than 3 councils? And you may come up with the conclusion that it would be much more efficient. We would have a stronger voice to central government if we were able to be stronger as the Wairarapa region. And taking pieces of functions that council have away is not going to make us stronger, it's going to make us weaker. So how do we project that? I think that's a governance question that we will need to look at this term. I really do.
Let's go to the deputy mayor's minutes. Oh, good.
Kia ora. Yeah, you've kind of answered it then, Jeff, but I mean, the next 10 months are going to be extremely volatile in the lead up to the election. I mean, already in the last 2 months, there's been 5 waters floated, you know, the 3 waters extended out into discharge into the ocean, which was never really debated as to what that meant and how and why. Entrenchment fell into the reading and then it got promptly pulled out. So it's extremely volatile. Is there anything, can we do more to stay on top of this, or is there more you need from us? Like, how do we make sure that we are on top of this from a Carterton perspective in the next 10 months? I suspect stuff is going to happen and we're going to have to respond really, really quickly. So is there more we can do?
I think we need to be selective about where we focus our attention. These 3 bills could drain us completely, and that is just one set of reforms that the government is looking at. We have a lot of reforms coming down. So where us and my team are looking is we focus with particular laser-like attention on the things that we can make a difference on, and we actually let the stuff that we can't change go by us. So I would look at Bill 2 and say there's probably not a lot of things we can change in Bill 2, because it is just a transfer of functions from one piece of legislation to another piece of legislation. Not a whole lot of point throwing something at a select committee from us. Certainly consumer protections and economic reform is something that our community will expect us to take a great deal of interest in. And so we should probably spend a bit of time on consumer protections and economic reform. Ditto, if I look at RMA reform, that's natural and built environment, spatial plan. Do we really think we're going to get more bang for buck throwing a submission into that process, or should we spend our time looking at our own district plan and the reforms that are happening with the regional council, where we probably are going to get more impact for our community? So my response would be, I think we're just going to have to pick and choose where we're going to get the most bang for buck and focus on those.
Thank you. Good answer.
Councillor Campbell, Cherry-Campbell.
Following on, thank you for the report, Jeff. The 3rd bill, the economic efficiency one, possibly a tongue-in-cheek question, but do we have slightly more faith that MB are looking after this bill than TIA? And for particularly small councils?
I have more faith that they've got the resources, because they are dealing with just one bill and not a complete transition of the 3 waters businesses to the water services entity. So they've got a much smaller piece to look after, and so they'll probably, I'd expect they would do that reasonably well. We need to consider that the size of these entities is absolutely enormous. I think you councillors may recall I put a graph up in one of our previous papers, and when you look at the Commerce Commission and everything that it entails, so the gas industry, the telecommunications industry, the electricity industry and the dairy industry, and you sum all of those up, the sum of all of those assets was less than one water services entity's assets. So the scale of what we're talking about in terms of economic regulation is absolutely enormous, not seen before in New Zealand's history. So I think our focus really needs to go on economic regulation, because that is what will impact our community more than anything. The price changes, the standardisation, the cross-subsidisation, if and when that occurs, and how we manage water charging for our community is really, really important. And I that's something that we should focus on.
The lessons learned from the Auckland Unitary Authority, revisiting us.
Correct.
Are there any?
Yeah, sorry, just the synopsis you just gave about the total package of reforms coming to local government is probably more near the mark of the discussions of the day, and Ron will probably know this. But I don't know that a changing government, bar the rhetoric, will make any difference whatsoever, because this was the rhetoric they talked before, and now they just use it against them to get vote catching. So I'm not like, I don't think that we're going to hang our hat on whether or not the government changes or jumping up and down to try and do that, because I've heard their conversations about wanting to do exactly what the Labour Party have done now when we were there, and that has taken away some of those powers and more if they could. So I think what you said just now about concentrating on what Carterton district plan is and how then, but with a special look at managing water going forward and putting up, like, because we've got statutory management of iwi over waterways coming in, the settlement being read this week coming. That'll be finalised this week, so that goes into law. That they're looking at it. I think it's a risk too far for any government to try and do that sort of thing. You'll have foreshore and seabed all over again. But so I think you're right in looking at the best place that the Carterton District Council could put themselves in is to have their own plans to be prepared and to work with iwi to mitigate some of these things that are in here. And I think you'll find a very willing iwi groups if they can get over themselves. Don't put that in the record. But going forward, it's been but going forward, I believe that's probably the best place that Carterton could put themselves in, is managing where we sit, because I think that stuff's going to be pretty much out of our hands.
So much. It's just, we've been told that one of the motivations behind this whole process is to save money for ratepayers, because the councils don't have the rating ability to fund all the new assets. But the third bill you're talking about would explain, I think, to people that the rate of water bill is not going to go away. They're just going to get them from a different place. And what we don't know, as I understand it, is to what extent Carterton water purchases are going to be paying for work in South Wairarapa, close to home, or Wellington on a bigger scale. So do you have a comment on where you think Carterton ratepayers and water consumers might rest?
Yes, so economic modelling suggests that you need 1 million customers in order to get scale for a large infrastructure business, which is why New Zealand is looking at 4 water services entities, because then they each get about 1 million customers, and you get purchasing scale, you get efficiency scale with rollout and operations. The reason you're looking at 1 million customers, you also get cross-subsidisation, where you have large pockets of customers that are closely concentrated together, that have short spans between them, that have large pipes, and it's very cheap to connect a new customer. Where you have longer distances to go, fewer customers, smaller pipe sizes, it's much more expensive to install network on the edge. And if you look at a grand scale, you could say Carterton's network is an edge, because we have fewer customers, we have smaller pipes, and we have longer distances to go between customers. So on that basis, I would expect Carterton District Council to be cross-subsidised by larger urban centres. Do I think that's going to happen on day one? No. I think it will take a decade before all of this washes out. But I do believe long-term Carterton will benefit from this. I also strongly believe that short-term, the transition will be very painful.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. That's a
And I what I consistently hear is if you haven't learned from history, then you're doomed to repeat the same mistakes and these same conversations. The transitionary costs. Someone recently said to me that if you were to look at the amalgamation debate and to start off by talking numbers, you would be wrong from the get-go. Was that you, Jeff? Yes, it was. And I think the point is that if people continue to tell ratepayers that this will save them money, they're ignoring the big elephant, which is the transitionary costs, which will take 5, 10 years. And as Auckland, I think one figure I heard out of Auckland was about 480 million. And that's before you even get on the road to start making savings. You've just blown that. So, yeah, I can see that as well. But I think the worst of what I worry about is that 1% shareholding and the level of voice that we would have, and your inability for ratepayers can turn up here at annual planning, make their views known. And that won't be happening. So those are the things I think. We can only deal, unfortunately, with what we know. We don't know what the outcome of election's going to be, and we don't know what these machinations around treaty settlements and Five Waters is going to be just yet. This is still a crystal ball exercise, and we don't own the crystal ball. And I think so. That's.
Can I add?
Yes, go, Jeff.
So for those of you, just a couple of comments about Five Waters. So the proposal suggestion was an inclusion of coastal water and geothermal, and that hasn't been taken up. But that's the Five Waters rather than just Three Waters. It doesn't look like it'll be taken up. The other comment I'd make, Councillor Laurence, is we as council discuss levels of service, and you all know when we increase level of service, that comes with an increased cost.
Yeah.
If we look at Three Waters and the reform process that we're talking about here in Three Waters, the whole plan is around increasing the level of service, right? Increasing the quality of water, the frequency that we have, or reducing the frequency of failure, and increasing the management of stormwater and wastewater. Now, I'll just leave it with you that in order to improve those services, improve those levels of services, there must be a consequential increase in investment. And that will result in a consequential increase in charging over time.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, the proposal will end up costing more because the heart of the proposal is to invest $180 billion more over the next 30 years into water.
Just to be
So some of that will be funded via debt, but it will eventually have to be funded via revenue.
So it's clear as mud.
Very good.
Our reform, what
Very
we
good.
target.
I just got one
Councillor Liddell.
One question to Jeff, on page 62,
Yes, I saw that.
second to last, third to last paragraph about the rural water. It appears now it has been included. And you're saying we're hopeful this change pertains just to drinking potable water and not the rural water races using stock water. Is there have you heard any more updates on that, Jeff? Or
I haven't heard any more. We have asked the question of the DIA. My concern is rural water becomes, one bore, two neighbours, and suddenly you're a supply. And that's quite common in rural districts, even if it's on a single farm and you've got one bore, two houses, is that a rural supply? So I don't have the answer, and as soon as I have it, I will let you know. I'm very hopeful that it won't include water races, so irrigation water. I think it's predominantly focused on potable water.
So that will affect Marae, particularly where there are papakainga.
Yeah.
That's why I put it in there.
Thank you.
Right.
Good report.
So the recommendation is that we receive the report. Are there any final, before I go to that, is there any final questions, comments? Councillor Ayling? Got to remember to look up. Yes.
I just think one thing that's worth noting is that there were 88,000 submissions on this bill. So I think we just need to remember that this is an issue that has huge interest around New Zealand.
From your research, Councillor Ayling, what other legislation has gone through a government that's had that number of submissions?
Yeah, it is unprecedented.
It is unprecedented.
From CB.
Yeah.
Going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd just add that particularly for local residents and ratepayers, anybody who's got an interest in this, which I'd suggest should be everybody, this report should be read because it's a very good summary and snapshot of where we are at this moment with enough history around it without being overloaded with the semantics of what's gone through. So again, I would encourage anybody listening or watching this to go online and read this one report. It'll bring people up to date with as much information as we've got in front of us right now.
Very good.
Thank you, Chair. That's a great report. All right, someone like to move that we receive from Councillor Cherry-Campbell and seconded Councillor Della. All in favour? Aye. Motion's carried. Thank you. 7.4. Draft interim speed management plan. Here we go.
I felt a chill.
Step into the lion's den.
I warmed them up for you.
Yeah, Jeff's report was good.
Kia ora, your worship and councillors and Ms. Fox. I take the report as read. And I just want to mention over the last year, one of the most common requests for services that we receive is that we need to do something about the speed. Our most common response was that we're in the process of developing a speed management plan so that we can have a consistent approach over the whole network. Obviously, there's been the new rule, transport rule for setting speed limits. There is all the guidance from Waka Kotahi, and it's important that our speed management plan aligns with what they are doing. So with that in mind, I'm open to take your questions.
There could be a few. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, I'm challenged by this in 100 different ways. I'll probably try and, I suppose, in terms of a question, looking down through the list of roads with the proposed, through the Tonkin and Taylor report, the proposed reductions, and so all reductions is one. What percentage of those roads are our district roads? Like of percentage-wise, the proposed changes versus total roads?
So that Councillor Williams, or Deputy Mayor Williams, that would be all the roads. They will all change because we change in principle, and that's based on the use of the road. So you would see in general a surfaced rural road will change from 100 kilometres per hour to 80 kilometres per hour. A gravel road will go from 100 kilometres per hour to 60 kilometres per hour. So that would be 100% change.
So, yeah, okay. I didn't realise it was 100%, but I figured it was pretty high. So essentially, I mean, from the conversations I have with people is that there's a definite desire for safer roads. But it seems Waka Kotahi's trapped in this notion that safer means slower. And I just don't. I mean, I understand the principles of Waka Kotahi around schools and around, you know, high use feeder roads. I completely get that. But to throw a blanket over, and I know it's not Waka Kotahi, it's Tonkin and Taylor presenting the report for our consideration. I just don't hold with the notion that, because I actually took it upon myself to drive around town at 40 kilometres an hour. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Not locals who have got business to perform or places to go and things to do. And I just, you know, when I read this report, I just felt it puts, particularly with the recommendations around adopting the principles and the priorities and so forth, where we're only step 2 of the 8-step process. And then one of the next steps is that people will have a say. And I'm really keen to hear what the people say. If people want this as a councillor, fair call. But, you know, so far we've only heard from Waka Kotahi and Tonkin and Taylor about what people might want. I want to hear what people really want before I want to support 100% of our roads having a speed decrease. I don't.
Yep.
Can I respond to that? The improving the safety of the road corridor is even though speed won't take away or won't make it safer on its own, it is one of the mechanisms in order to make it safer. So you can also improve the infrastructure to make it safer, but that comes at a significant cost. There's also the level of enforcement that's also required to make it safer. The study, and that's why the data supports that that a crash at a lower speed results in less severe injuries or fatalities. And I think that's the basis of their study, and that's also the basis of the guidance that's given to us to develop our speed management plan.
Can I, sorry, this is not a cross-examination. I'm just trying to, when I read this, and I mean, you strangle stats hard enough, they'll confess to anything. And I read all these graphs and some of it was complimentary and some of it was not. But from what I can understand, of the 10 years, there's something like 8 fatalities in our district, notwithstanding or not including Southway. And of those, only 2 of those 8 was relating to road condition. The others were other factors. So I'm just trying to get my head around 100% speed increase across all of our roads is driven by 2 fatalities in 10 years relating to road. It just seems to be a massive overreaction.
So the principles that we have need to be signed off by Waka Kotahi. So as a result, a lot of the principles that are being used on the state highway by default are given to local roading authorities like us to implement. And we see challenges with having different principles that are being used by Waka Kotahi on local roads, because ultimately Waka Kotahi need to sign off our speed review. And so we are a little bit between a rock and a hard place where Big Brother says, well, this is what's good for me. And we've either got to convince Big Brother that we're going to use a different set of principles and the reasons why we're going to do that because we're different, or we have to follow the same process that they're following and as a consequence implement the same outcomes that they are trying to achieve with their Road to Zero. So that would be a fair assessment.
That is definitely correct.
I can share a little bit with you as a result of the conversations at the Regional Transport Committee meeting yesterday, where Waka Kotahi made some interesting statements. But Councillor Cretney.
Thanks, His Worship. I've got a few questions. The first one is on page 21 of the attachment. And there's the
What point number is it?
it's just before 3.1, so that's 3.9. It's on page 21.
Yep.
There's a paragraph there. Recent community feedback on Kotahi's engagement on State Highway 2 Featherston to Marston Speed Review includes the following points. And it states the majority of locals thought that speeds need to be reduced through the towns of Featherston, Carterton, Greathead and Marston, and that the current 70, 100 km/h speed limits are far too fast. Many said they need to go down to 50 km/h to prevent crashes. I find that really confusing. We're talking about through the towns. I don't know any of the towns that have 70, 100 km/h through the towns. So it's very confusing. That's just why I just wondering if you might be able to explain how or why Tonkin and Taylor have written that in like that.
So, Councillor Cretney, that is feedback from Waka Kotahi's consultation, and it could be the 70 km/h sections buffer zones before and after you enter and exit town. So there are areas that is a 70 km/h zone and 100 km/h zones. So we haven't gone into Wakakutai's consultation. That is just a comment from Wakakutai's consultation.
Okay, just the way it says through the towns.
Like you say, Steve, on page 25, there's on colourblind, showing 80k through the middle of town.
I think that's just a colour showing it's State Highway 2, isn't it?
I think from memory, when we spoke about it last triennium, taking Carterton, for example, where it goes from 50 to 70 up through past the East Taratahi pub. I think that was one area that I know I've had residents say that ought to be 50. So that might have been part of it. And they may have had feedback, down in Featherstone as well, possibly. But it's not, I agree, it's not good.
Well, it's kind of, to me, through town is in between the 50 to 50 speed limits. As soon as you go outside that, you're leaving town and you're heading out towards out of the district, if I can put it that way. But that was just one question. It just didn't sound right. And if this is going out into the
misleading
community, that's how they might perceive it as well. But how did Tonkin and Taylor come up with some of their changes that they've made? Like you've mentioned gravel roads. How Dalesford Road, where it goes up into the Kaipatangata, it changes down to 60. How does the Waihine Gorge stay at 80? So it's gravel.
So Councillor Cretney, like we said, this is the interim. So we received this report and now we are reviewing it and looking into the accuracy of how it's been applied. So if the link that we shared with the councillors, if you look at it today, it would have already been adjusted from yesterday, from things that we've picked up that's not aligned with the speed management plan. So we haven't finalized the draft or the draft that will be going out for consultation, but we did commit to share the interim speed management plan as soon as we have it. So that's why there will be anomalies around. The initial one also didn't have Dalefield Gladstone School noted, so we got them to add it on. So we are going to, before we go to out to consultation, we would have gone through all the roads to make sure that it fits the plan we're proposing.
So the desktop exercise that Tonkin and Taylor have done is now being reviewed by management who have a on the ground understanding of the road, the narrow width, the camber, on our surfacing. And that will form part of the preparatory work that we do for our consultation. So what we were asking council for here was feedback on the principles rather than the actual proposals for those specific roads, because we still need to work through and refine the desktop exercise to make sure that it's robust enough.
The principles and priorities will drive that.
That's exactly right.
Councillor Cherry-Campbell.
I have a question. It's 3.11 on page 23 of the additional attachment. And it's relating to the environment around schools. 30 kilometres in urban and 60 in rural schools. I have an issue personally with that. I don't understand why it should be 60 in rural schools. You've got exactly the same risk that needs to be mitigated. And I personally, I don't like what my fellow councillors would think, but I think if it's going to be 30 around schools, which I fully support, I think that also needs to be around our rural schools, because in some ways there's even more risks that the road speeds are higher in the rural areas, and the risk of kids just booting it across the road, I think actually increases the risk to our urban. So I don't know if fellow councillors have.
I've already had feedback from Dalefield School that they are requesting 30 kilometres per hour outside this.
It's about consistency.
It's about consistency, absolutely about consistency, yeah.
I think we should note that. I mean, that I don't do the same in consistency. I highlight
Yeah, I'd like to see some more specific recommendations of speed changes for specific certain areas. To blanketly say that this is going to be all the way through town and so on, as Councillor Robin was saying, at Taratahi end of town, there's an area of town where you're heading into 70 Ks before you get into the 100 Ks, but it seems to now, because of spread of town and people, population moving out, that's actually starting too soon. And so what we've seen is like a blanket approach to everything, rather than let's have some specific incidences, like from Carter's Bush to Waipuapua past Gladstone School. That'd be a great reduced whole speed area going past the Marae, because one of the biggest problems we have is Tangi. And people going 100 Ks an hour straight past the Marae, and there are people going in and out across the road all the time. It just freaks me out. But also past the school. So there would be, I'd like to see some options of, instead of a blanket change to the entire road, which is what I've seen on here, that there are around the populous areas, that this bit to this bit, more specific change. Same with the schooling at Kahutara. When you go past Kahutara, there's a sign saying a 40 K zone coming up, which slows you up. And then you get there, it's on a school day, shit, it's 9 o'clock, slow down, marama. And then I get right down to 40, go past school, go, hey kids, and then get out of that area and off we go again. So if it's going to be 30, great, 30, you can't have a 60 here and a 30 there. That makes no sense to anybody, because in your brain you're going, is it 60 or is it 30? What am I doing? And so I'd like to see some options of more specific targeting of areas, and like, you know, these are guidelines. The Land Transport have given us guidelines, whakakotahi, whatever you want to call them, have given us guidelines. And so these guys have taken a blanket approach with the guidelines and not been specific. So I'm glad to hear that Jeff has said you're going to get down to it. But while you're getting down to it, please think about it in the specificity around entering and exiting towns and around school zones, and especially in the rural areas where there is quite a big up in Gladstone is quite different to lots of other little rural bits where you go through now. But where there's a school and a pub, there's going to be people and a marae.
Councillor Ayling.
Hi everyone. So I had things I'd like to raise. The two main areas that I see of concern is compliance and the capacity for the police to manage this. I went through and counted how many roads would be changing from 100 Ks to 60 Ks, and there are 84 roads that would be in speed. And I'm concerned that for people, locals particularly, who travel daily, they know that they can drive on a stretch in a certain area at a set speed. And I think if we start willy-nilly putting signs around that say 60, people are going to start seeing signs as not a set law and just something optional. And I think we want people to take our road signs very seriously. And I'm concerned having these signs everywhere, people will think, I know better than the road sign actually. And second point was, we have a stretched police force. And I'm wondering how they're going to manage all these back roads out to the coast, making sure that people are going the 60 Ks on gravel roads. So, I have some concerns with, compliance.
Can I comment on that? Councillor Ayling, Whakakotahi, as one of their steps in improving the safety on the roads is to address enforcement as well. We're not obviously not part of the enforcement part of it, but I know that it is a priority on it, and I'm pretty confident they're working on how they will improve enforcement.
Speed cameras.
Well, perhaps I could augment that. A large part of the police funding for enforcement comes from Whakakotahi, and the board of Whakakotahi have actually written to the Minister of Police to outline their concerns with the lack of enforcement by police, despite the fact that Whakakotahi are funding them to do that enforcement. So there has been a response back from the police that have acknowledged that they've dropped the ball, particularly around enforcement on roading, and they are going to pick up their game. So we hope that that will have an impact. Whether or not that impact is more than just transitory is really up to the forces outside Carterton.
But isn't that
isn't that coming at this issue from the wrong end? Like council's put in the position, if we follow Waka Kotahi on behalf of the government's agenda, we're positioning ourselves to be advocating for more police funds to enforce something that actually we don't want in the first place. It just seems weird.
I think the dilemma we have, and I think the CE outlined it earlier on, as it was explained to us yesterday at the regional transport hui, by Waka Kotahi themselves, they are simply acting on a national policy statement put out by this government. They then went on to say that they are acting on the road to zero policy. And these are their words. It was recorded, you can play it back. They then, interestingly enough, some of us looked at each other, went on to say, if we don't like it, we should take it up with the government directly. Now, we are in a situation, I think, and this is where I'm struggling, and I'll be straight about that. Waka Kotahi will be the agency that will approve or not our speed management plan, correct? If they don't like what they see in our speed management plan, if it doesn't fit with their speed management plan, national speed management plan, there is a possibility they will tell us to adjust or not approve, or both. Not approve on the basis that you adjust these things. We ultimately, I take it, would like to have the power to set our own speed limits, because the process as it is right now is not satisfactory. It takes too long, and we don't have the authority to do that. We have to go to Waka Kotahi. They made it very clear they want to devolve this power out to territorial authorities. Stop me if I go any of this wrong. The question is, we're being asked to adopt the principles. We can do as we prefer. And the plan that management eventually bring back to us that goes out for consultation will be what we want it to be. That's the bottom line. It may, the final consultative plan, I'm assuming, may have none of these speed recommendations in it. It could easily be a question to constituents, or you tell us which roads you believe are a problem. And I think, but where we're coming to and here is whether or not we adopt the principles and the priorities of the interim speed management plan, which is a carbon copy of Waka Kotahi. I have problems with Waka Kotahi's principles. We have made that clear at the combined council meeting, and we aren't the only council who made it very, very clear at the last two meetings that I attended. There are wide concerns around that, but government policy is government policy. Waka Kotahi are running off of that, and they are pushing it down to us for us to adopt.
Can we, just following on from his worship, with the three recommendations, that the one I have the issue with around is adopting the principles and priorities of the plan. I understand how that's derived, but if we adopt them at this point, then go out for consultation to the public, then the public assumes that we are supportive of that Waka Kotahi principles and priorities and agenda. Can we still enable this to go forward for consultation by changing that word adopts to notes, as we've done in recommendation 3? So we're noting the priorities and the principles, but we're taking a middle ground, if you like, to enable the people to see, because it's all very well having principles and priorities. It's where the rubber hits the road, which is around the speed limits on people's roads, and whether or not they're supportive of that as an outcome of those principles and priorities. Because if there's major pushback from people, then my position as a councillor would be to push back up the line and say, hang on a minute, there's an issue on the ground with your principles and priorities that are resulting in that as an outcome. Is that fair?
Perhaps I could, I think what's being asked is we need to prepare a consultation document, and that has to have a bunch of assumptions that we're working on. And at this stage, we were asking council to consider those assumptions so that we could develop the consultation document and go out to talk to the public about it. Now, you're absolutely right. We don't have to adopt the assumptions now, but we as management need clarity on what assumptions you would like us to use in order to prepare that consultation document. Now, we could use these assumptions without adopting them. We could just say, you're noting that management are going to build a consultation document on these assumptions.
Yeah.
And that means that we could, if you disagree with the assumptions following consultation, we can then, you haven't been restricted.
So it's almost combining recommendations 2 and 3, removing adopts, and it's noting principles and priorities to enable management to proceed with.
That's where I'd like to land. Yeah, those are the principles and priorities being used for this purpose of the document prior to hearing from the people.
And we apologise if it's created too much angst by adopting and not assuming.
Tonkin and Taylor have already utilised those priorities to produce the big management plan.
That's their recommendation. Yeah.
So we've noted that they've utilised that.
Yeah.
Can I get a quick go around the table?
I've probably got an unpopular opinion. I'm not an expert at this stuff, so I'm happy to take on board experts' opinions on it. And I'm all for a safer and more connected community. And I think that's what the changes are going to do. Like safety with cyclists and walking, kids around schools. So yeah, I'm kind of quite supportive of it. I can see the benefits of it. One thing I have to ask is around kindergartens, like Carterton kindergarten has 45 kids there per day, plus all of the school age siblings dropping the kids off. Has there been any consideration given to that area on Victoria Street there specifically? Like a lot of the other big
schools.
We'll take a look. We'll have a look at it.
Not just preschool, early childhood as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a cutoff in the size of the centre or how you can determine that. But like I know, yeah, people whiz up and down Victoria Street.
So, Councillor Newman, we can definitely look at that specifically. We worked on the registered school, so most definitely we can include that.
Daycare centres.
Good point. Yeah.
Daycare centres and kindergarten.
Really good point.
Councillor Gill.
People have talked to me about the speed reductions and all that, and a bit unpopular with a few places, even though we talk about, we're going to, if you crash, less injury. But a lot of people, I think they're going to struggle with some of these speeds, like Lincoln Road for a start, it's 70k now, I think it is now, and dropped to 40. I think a lot of people are going to struggle. Just put a speed camera down there and you just get the revenue just like that. People are going to.
Councillor
Just quick point of clarification. Did I hear you say that one of the fundamental rule was it was going to be 60 k's on metal and 80 k's on seal?
That's correct.
Because that's not what's in here. I mean, you've got Norfolk Road, well, you haven't, but they had Norfolk Road for 60 kilometres an hour all the way, and it's sealed for 15 kilometres.
Pretty much to the gate.
Yeah.
Councillor Laurence, so like we said, we're still reviewing it. If you have a look at the GIS map layer that we've shared, that's what we're going to use for consultation as well. So you can check your address but that will then be articulated in that as well.
In general, I think some of the speed limits on here on what we might call by our standards in the country arterial roads, like Norfolk Road, will create a lot of speeding tickets.
Norfolk Road in particular, up to just over the other side of the railway line, has quite a lot of pedestrian traffic.
Yeah, up to the railway line.
They end up having a lower speed limit for that particular piece up into just beyond the railway line, and then there is less pedestrian traffic, so we expect there may be less risk at that point.
Yeah, so I agree, you can't implement a rule that you can't police. It just makes no sense at all. No one's going out to Glenburn to try and police the dirt road down there, going through a farmer's farm all the way to get some kaiwana. No one's doing that ever. Haven't seen a cop out there for years. And so what things that I think are more practical are things like solar speed indicators around schools. Every school should have one where they appear, people slow down. Have them on the entries and exits of town, or entries especially to town, sorry. People slow down, they see their speed, they go, ooh, and they slow up. The other thing I'd like to see is the same sort of thing around Marae, specifically for tangi, where you can have a flashing light saying there's a tangi up the road, slow down because there's going to be cars everywhere. And I know we get the Māori wardens out if they're available, and we get some cones out if they're available, and get some little signs out if they're available, but that seems to be a potential space. And I think if we get this out to the community for consultation, you'll come back with everybody telling you exactly which roads they do want and which ones they don't, which will help us be more specific in the plan going back to council. So I can't wait for the submission stage actually. But I mean, not just the signs. I'd like to see some of those solar speed signs as on every school and every marae, early childhood centres maybe.
Begun, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, nothing further from me. I agree with you, Dale, about the rewording of the recommendations.
Mr. Talon?
Thank you. Yeah, I've found quite a few mistakes in this report, and I'm happy to share them with you at a later time, Johannes. I note that there is a speed increase in Morton Road from 50 to 60, which is real cool. So
It's the only one.
That's already been addressed.
The only other thing I've got is under the risks in your report, Johannes, you say that the requirements of land it is a land transport rule and mandatory for RCAs. Council is therefore obliged to comply. My question was, what are the consequences if we don't comply? Is we're only obliged to.
We'll bake your cake with a fire.
We'll be.
Perhaps we could come back to you on, they might be more far reaching than what Johannes may think of on the spot.
Yeah, well, when the legislation's not written very clearly.
More pushback than 3 orders by the sound. Look, okay, so Councillor Cretney,
I just had one more question. Once you've gone back and you've made all these changes and everything, is it going to come back to us to endorse this to go out to the community for consultation?
That's what I heard.
We can bring it back if you'd like.
Yes, yes.
I'd definitely like to be able to have the opportunity to look over it and rather than goes out. Yeah.
Build up.
Will it have to be in council meeting, or could it be in?
No.
Policy and project.
Policy.
Or else just given out to us and give us a week to comment or something
And
like
then we'll
that.
tell you if we need a meeting.
Yeah,
cool.
Oh, sorry, my actual ask is a time frame on this as well, for that step 3 and step 4, have a time frame.
Ms. Fox, it was really following this. We know how much work we have to put in again, and then preparing it, and then working with the comms team of how soon we can go to consultation. But that would probably only be February next year, and then. So we will go and work on the interim speed management plan and then present it to the councillors and give them time to get back to us.
Councillor Ayling, have you had a final comment to make it all?
Yeah. So I think you guys have said Dale regarding.
Okay.
Jumping in and out, great.
We're losing you.
Grace, perhaps you'd like to just turn the camera off while, because it may be the audio works better without your camera.
Can you hear? Hello, hello.
Yeah, yes.
Hello, hello.
Yep. Yes,
You got me?
go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So I was just going to say, I totally agree with what Dale has suggested, and not adopting, but acknowledging, because I think this policy principle is nanny state.
Thank you.
We heard that.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
just really just to finish off, I mean, to be fair, this is now public, even this draft. So anybody that's got an interest in this particular topic can see what the beginning document looks like. And after councillors' comments today, it's kind of, you know, almost the consultation process has begun by default. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was just, the only comment I'd make is we could make a submission easier to put all pages from page 26 to page 50 and ask people what they wanted. But but seriously, I think Councillor Newman's comment meant that Appendix A would need to be added to include all daycare centres, kindergartens, play centres, that sort of thing, because I do know they've got a very restrictive definition of schools in our view. So I want to move to the recommendations. Firstly, that we have recommendation, we received the report, and the Deputy Mayor suggested that we change the word for adopts to notes. So let's start with the first one, that we received the report. Move for a second, please. Councillor Newman, seconded Councillor Cherry-Campbell. All in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Note, second recommendation, amending that word to notes as the proposition from the Deputy Mayor, moved by the Deputy Mayor, that notes the principles and priorities of the interim speed management plan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gallen. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone against? In favour, Grace?
Aye, yep.
Thank you. Motion's carried. Recommendation 3, notes management proposed to proceed with a public consultation draft on the interim speed management plan early in 2023. I'd add that be circulated to councillors for their perusal before it goes public.
So our first meeting,
After councillor consideration.
our first meeting's not until about the 15th or 18th of February, so
Correct.
might be too late.
Yeah. So have you got that word in there, Robin?
I didn't get the end part, but notes management proposes, you know, whatever it says there, and then what else after that?
Comma after 2023, after council consideration.
Okay, yep.
Moved by Councillor Cherry-Campbell, seconded by Councillor Della. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried.
Yeah.
Thank
very well.
you.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Councillor Ayling, I just note under our standing orders, when we have someone attending via video conference, when the vote occurs, we do need your video cameras to be on so that
Right,
the
no
council
problem.
can recognise whether or not you vote yes or no. I'm happy
Yep.
to have it turned off while you're speaking if you've got issues on bandwidth. I think it's just really good practice to have your camera turned on when we are voting, if that's possible.
Yep, no problem. Yep.
Thank you, Jeff. 7.5, submission proposed change 1 to the regional policy statement for the Wellington region. Sophia.
Change 1.
Thank you, Your Worship. Marama, just acknowledging you, elected members. As we have noted previously to the elected members, the submissions for the plan change was falling during the election period in between councils. As such, at that time, the delegation sat and decision-making sat with management and our Chief Executive Officer to put a submission in on the policy statement on behalf of council. what we have done with this paper is we are bringing it to this elected members to ratify that report. I'm not going to go through the whole report, it's quite comprehensive what we submitted on, and I have updates previously on our key submission points. I would just like to touch on a couple of things that have happened since this report would have been at the elected members. So at 11 o'clock on Monday, we got the summary of decisions released from Greater Wellington Regional Council. And we have until the 19th of December to determine if we want to submit further on any of our points. That decision we haven't quite made whether we will do that or not at this stage, mainly because the summary document is 983 pages long. And it wouldn't just be looking at our submissions, we would need to be looking at the Greater Wellington Regional Council's officers' submissions as to the changes. We would be interested in looking at beef and lamb, fed farmers, the other councils in the region to either support or not. So that's a work in progress, but yes, in a day and a bit, that's quite a lot of
Reading.
Yeah.
reading. I would just like to note, though, that we submitted quite strongly on one of the policies, policy 57, which was about the integrated transport.
You did. You did.
And we were asking that this becomes a little bit clearer and recognising the fact that the Wairarapa is a rural area and we don't have the fabulous public transport network that we get in the Wellington region. And so the officer's recommendation, comments against our submission points, was to have integrated transport minimising private vehicle travel and trip length, and in brackets where practical. So I actually think that's a really good win for our council and our district. The second one that we did request on policy CC 14 to delete clause F, as it was in relation to climate resilient urban areas. And a lot of it was to do with, they were referencing stuff that was more Building Act, like having buildings and infrastructure that are able to withstand the predicted future temperatures, intensity and duration of rainfall and wind. And we submitted that we do support the intent of it, but it actually sits more under the Building Act, and that we think that that particular part of it could be deleted, but that you would still, there's still all the rest of the policies in here about protecting, enhancing natural ecosystems from the effect of climate change, providing for efficient use of water and energy, the capturing, storing and recycling of water and community scale versions of that. We just thought that actually talking about specific buildings and infrastructure was outside the scope of the regional council, and that there's better legislation that can deal with that. So there were a couple of points I just wanted to note, and you will note on page 2 of my report, and having seen some of the decisions that have come out, I'm actually really pleased that we did submit on this particular aspect, and I've highlighted a little bit in 5.2 under the tangata whenua, how we were very unclear how to apply the statements from Rangatane. I'm just having to log back on. And how that they would be practically dealt with in a plan. So with the statements from the iwi, and we just have to remember that Greater Wellington Regional Council are mandated to work with iwi, not hapu. And with the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, they have, of course, it is giving effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. And in that, iwi is required by the National Policy Statement to express what Te Mana o Te Wai means to them in their own words. So in the Greater Wellington region, there is 6 iwi authorities that will all express what Te Mana o Te Wai means to them and how it should be implemented in the plan. I think it's excellent that out of those 6 iwi, the only 2 iwi who have managed to get their Te Mana o Te Wai statements into the proposed plan change 1 is Rangatane and Kahungunu. Yeah, I think our iwis deserve a big thumbs up for that one. And our submission point was, we just wanted clearer linkages with the objectives and policy. We were reading the statements going, how is this going to work? Is it an objective? Is it a policy? And we didn't want to speak on behalf of Māori, but we did want Greater Wellington to recognise that how that was linking in the plan wasn't very clear to us. So I was very pleased when I was just having a look at the Rangatane submission that they've actually noted that it's not clear. And I just want to read out a little bit that they've put in regards to their own statement of Te Mana o Te Wai expression. And they've said that while we appreciate the opportunity to express the statement as we see fit, having now seen the structure of Objective 12, we have some concerns as to how the statement will be practically adopted and given effect to. It is not clear when the statement should be applied and when it shouldn't. As currently written, Rangatane o Wararapa's statement includes several objectives as well as other content, which for practical purposes may be more effective if they were sitting in other parts of the RPS, such as in the policies or methods. So I think it's great that Rangatane have also recognised that how it was getting applied in this plan wasn't very clear. So, and yeah, very pleased that Carterton and District Council picked up on that and could support our iwi partners in ensuring that their statements are going to be clear. Other than that, happy to answer questions, and I would just like to assure elected members that given we don't have any meetings between now and the 19th, we will be keeping you up to date on once we've assessed everything. Do we need to make further comments? Are we happy with the wins we've got? What are we going to achieve if we need to do anything further? But we'll be keeping you updated with emails on that respect.
Well, before we go around the table, I've got to say, Jeff Solitaire, that's a superb submission, and I read it, every word of it, and I'm very pleased at how strongly you push back on some of those clear clauses with clear opposition and clear justification as to why. And I've got to say, Solitaire, it strikes me that the level of technical expertise that you've exhibited actually clearly surpasses that of the writers.
Kia ora.
So going around the table.
Yeah.
Yes, so Tautoko, His Worship, yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for putting the effort into it and, yeah, getting right to the heart of the issues. Probably for me personally, spending much more time on it now probably isn't going to be, you know, you said your piece, we've said our piece and implemented into it and, yeah, move on. But well done.
Yeah. Anyone else?
No, I had no worries at all, obviously, with you guys doing the, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else, Councillor Ayling?
No, I totally agree with what you've said there. Yep, she's pushed back well and truly. It's great.
Yeah, love the pushback. I think that the iwi are moving into a place of more established co-management, I guess, co-decision making over essentially the resources specifically in the area. Things like being the carbon sink, well, actually we don't mind being the carbon sink because that means we might get Wairarapa Moana back to its former glory and have some money put in. Things like the Carterton District Council, and I'm not talking on behalf of iwi, but as Hurunui-o-Rangi Marae, these are things, the discussions that we're in at the minute. So the climate change agenda and everybody's wanting to get the Māori point of view, and so they ask iwi reps to come on and be part of that. We have pushed back as Māori, and I've been part of the climate change group, to say, well, actually, you're going to have to contract that stuff from us because we're doing it as a tick box exercise, which helps you, but it actually doesn't help us. Things like the whaitua, which we call the incremental meetings of distraction, either carry on and do anything else that they want to, took some 4 years. And then before that, there was the Land and Water Forum, which was 7 years in the making, with more incremental meetings of distraction while government carried on and did whatever they wanted. And now we have the Water Resilience Group, which, yes, is great. All of these things are great, but we've given input into where we think we can make real change and what Māori positioning on some of these things are. What we're asking is you take the dust off them and have a look. Because if we're going to be asked to participate in strategic direction making for where we want to highlight the resource management of our local resources, then if there's no actual funding that's going to help deliver any of those strategic policies that we've just been spending the last 7 years in taking part in, then we're getting to the point of, well, what is the point of this action that we're doing? We'd rather just go off and do what we want to do for ourselves and then just push everybody's buttons until it happens, which is not the best way to do things. Obviously, would prefer to be in interconnected space, which is why you get the statement. And sometimes we look at the government policy and go, these guys really don't know what they're up to. And you've done a great job of pushing back at those areas. But I think if Carterton District Council going forward are wanting iwi partnership, sometimes it's already there, sometimes it's been there, and sometimes it's not going to need to be contracted in, because these are all people working in their voluntary time outside their normal jobs to come and help participate in the local stakeholder conversation. So I think those are important key things to remember going forward, and that we may have very different point of views, but that's a starting point, not an end point. And as long as we can continue down the road of open dialogue with all of the partners at play, then that's a better pathway for us. And lastly, in the RMA, and I've said it already in this meeting, the mana whakahono is the opportunity for iwi to engage with councils, council by council, or the three councils together in our small region, to then, and yes, be prepared for this, because once we pull the pin on that, the councils by law are not allowed to object to that. It is an agreed negotiation over an 18-month period about how we then move to manage our resources in this area, including water, looking at climate change, water races, all those sorts of things, allocation, and wāhi tapu. So I think that might help the cause in the policy statements and across all those areas where the iwi come willingly to the table. And I'm signalling that 2023 might be the time that that's going to happen for ourselves.
Madam, I get a sense also that, you know, there have been three councils.
Yeah.
It makes it even more challenging. And then we're talking about the consultations that happen between Marae Hapu with their own iwi, both the iwi.
So and the environmental.
Then if I could just add in, then we now have the addition also of the PSGEs, whose commercial interests may fit more on one day with fed farmers than they do with the marae, and create this. I guess what I'm wondering is that all puts stress and strain on hapu and on marae to be heard. And it seriously is a question of capability and capacity to meet all three councils' needs.
So what I hear a lot is that Māori don't lack the capability and capacity to be able to engage at this level, which is actually saying that they need to have, because I asked Tracy Martin this, they need to have a greater understanding of where the political landscape lies, what the policies say, what currently is the situation for how water is divvied up around Wairarapa and what are all the players that go into that. But equally, I would say that all councils need to have their capability and their capacity ramped up around cultural competency, cultural embeddedness, and their own understanding of the wāhi tapu and the whakaaro of mātai, which we've engaged in for years now. And if people haven't taken that on board, then I think there is a lack of capability and capacity on both sides of the coin, which is why we can't be sitting around the table and writing it together from the get-go. But I do believe that the mana whakahono provision in the RMA, everyone goes, what is that? It's in the RMA, I made sure. Anyway, so that lever gives iwi the ability to engage when they're ready, which I believe we're ready now, to outline this is how we see the management of the resources of the area going forward for iwi. Now, would we prefer to do that with one council at a time because of capability and capacity? Actually, yes, because I'm going to just drop the No one listen. I'm just going to drop the mic here, as we'd rather pick you off one by one. It's like a treaty negotiation settlement all over again, but on a local level with local councils, with regional councils, to say this river, don't touch that. Can you get your sewage out of that one, please? Because if the rivers ran clean and you close the mouth for drought protection, there's your biggest dam you're ever going to have. And then we'd fill all the rivers up, all the valley. Now, that's a serious thought for iwi, looking at climate change mitigation going forward, and to find funding to look at modelling and scientific information and so on and so on and so on. The capability and the capacity is there. And I think what the stretch is that we've got those people who have the capability and capacity are working across more and more of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could,
I think
yeah, we're looking time.
going to
Okay, I'll pick it up at the
make
end.
it,
Sean?
Did you want to?
Sure. At the end? Sure. Okay.
I mean, mine was just a question and now you've had a response back, Solitaire, on Monday. Are we still going to, or are you still going to request an opportunity to speak at any hearings in support of our submissions?
That was in our first document anyway, so whether we do additional submissions or not, we haven't given away our right to talk to our submission.
Okay, yeah, that was because I was wondering if they'd actually come up with dates or not. And I'm assuming that our submission was possibly in alignment with our neighbouring councils as well.
We did. We shared our submission with our neighbouring councils. We also shared it with Wairarapa Federated Farmers as well. And the same reciprocal approach happened. Yeah, there is some points of difference across the councils, but we did try to not contradict each other on the big topics.
We also shared it with iwi.
Awesome, thank you. They answered all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Dell? No. Councillor Ayling?
No, no
No,
further comments.
questions? Yeah. So mine, you just, and then I'll leave to you to wrap, please, Jeff, if you would. I guess the one thing that stands out for me is that, and I'm really am quite taken by the quality of the submission you lodged, and I'm very keen to see it ratified. I guess the things that I don't know if has stood out so clearly is whether they fully comprehend or are factoring in these changes and the impact it'll have on food security, food supply, cost of living increases, prices at the supermarkets. They cannot continue to rule land out of active production and at the same time express concern about, as they say in here, the well-being of the communities. I wrote another comment down here. I was referring to policy CC6, forestation. And one of the things that I think I'd like us to have a think about whether we express these views is that if more land is taken out of production and put into forestry, we have already seen in the Wairarapa where communities have shrunk. Schools have had to close, leaving one case in South Wairarapa, a school roll drop to 7 or 8 students, which forced the Minister of Education to close it, affecting those few families that remained. There is a direct drop down into our rural communities in terms of their viability when you take land out of active production, turn it into forestry where there is no gain. The impact on GDP, the impact on earning and employability, none of these things. They talk well-being, but they don't think well-being. And I'm sorry, when they talk about agriculture as the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the Wellington region, I'm looking at page 11. My first question is, well, what's the first? Vehicles. Vehicles. And yet I can drive to Wellington anytime, twice a day, and I will see one person in a metropolitan area where they have 7 modes of transport available to them. 7. And I'm talking walking, cycling, taxis, buses, trains, personal car.
Uber.
A taxi.
They have 7 modes of transport, and yet they've got cars, chock-a-block, one person per car, peak hour traffic morning, peak hour traffic at night. And they're concerned about farming. I think somewhere there has to be a degree of strength in the pushback in there. And I'm not saying, I'm not demeaning and diminishing the quality of your report at all, Solitaire. It really is. But I think there is a human factor in there that they're talking about, but they don't pay respect to. And if we see our community shrink up, then services come all the way back as well. That's my only comment. But Jeff, yeah.
I'll just make a comment. This is just a hobby horse. It's nothing relevant. Everybody says the science is settled, but the science on the impact of methane on the climate is subject to significant argument, and there seems to be a consensus that the measure that is generally adopted, because it's been adopted, is wrong. There's a better one, but because you have to relitigate the Paris Accord and every other damn thing, no one wants to know about it. Secondly, there is no proper recognition given to the sequestration of carbon by grassland farming. And I do think our economy is getting smacked around the ears on assumptions which are wrong.
And Steve, what I haven't seen in here is the other conversation around science and work being done with government funds right now with Callaghan Innovation around other mechanisms of sequestering carbon emissions, like pipes in the ground that absorb it in the air and hold it and store it and convert it to nitrogen. That work's going on right now, but there's no mention of it. And there's no mention of the advances that have been made with for cattle beasts, where they get to swallow a pill and then for 6 months it limits and restricts their methane emissions. That's all been funded. That research is right now being funded by government, but it's not given any credibility in here. So I just share these things and for further conversation, Jeff, when you carry on your sterling work.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, councillors. If I could sum up, planning documents are not for everyone. I know some councillors would prefer to have dental surgery than go through planning documents, and perhaps not at our council. So I understand this isn't, reading planning documents is really sometimes quite hard work. What I would encourage you is this isn't just a management response. As councillors, you also have direct relationships with Greater Wellington regional councillors, and you have a part to play in this, in your governance role, ensuring that our voices are heard at Greater Wellington's board table, and you can play your part as well as management. And so I just encourage you to do that at every opportunity. If you have views that need to be heard at Greater Wellington, then please make them heard through Greater Wellington councillors.
Yeah. We
will do so through the formal submission process, and you can also help that cause through governance. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sol. So I'd like to move on the recommendations, after which we'll take a 5-minute break and stretch our legs a tad before we carry on, if that's okay. So first recommendation is that we receive the report. 2 people to move. Mover and a seconder, please. Mover, Councillor Cretney, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Councillor Ayling. Second recommendation, that the council ratifies the submission made by the management of the proposed change 1 to the regional policy statement. So Councillor Cherry-Campbell to move swiftly in there. Councillor Gallen seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any against? Unanimous. Thank you. Can I just call a 5-minute?
Absolutely. We've been going for 2 hours. That would be appropriate. Normally a 10-minute break.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Thank you. Stretch our legs, have a coffee.